Dear Patriots, before the news starts, please subscribe to our patriotic channel by clicking the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up to this video. Don't forget to leave your opinion below in the comments section. Share the news on Facebook and Twitter so you friends see it. Thank you.
FEC probes whether NRA got illegal Russian donations. The Federal Election Commission has launched a preliminary investigation into whether Russian entities gave illegal contributions to the National Rifle Association that were intended to benefit the Trump campaign during the 2016 presidential election, according to people who were notified of the probe. The inquiry stems in part from a complaint from a liberal advocacy group, the American Democracy Legal Fund, which asked the FEC to look into media reports about links between the Rifle Association and Russian entities, including a banker with close ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin. A spokesman for the NRA and its lobbying arm, the Institute for Legislative Action, which together contributed $30 million to Trump's presidential campaign, declined to comment on the FEC's probe. An FEC spokesman also declined to comment, saying the agency is prohibited by law from confirming or denying any investigations until they're complete. Under FEC procedures, the preliminary investigation is likely to require the NRA to turn over closely guarded internal documents and campaign finance records. Depending on what FEC investigators and lawyers find, the agency could launch a full-blown investigation, impose fines, or even make criminal referrals to the Justice Department and Special Counsel Robert Mueller, people familiar with the probe said. The preliminary investigation focuses on issues similar to those raised recently by Senator Ron Wyden, D.R., the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, as part of his investigation into possible collusion between the NRA, the Trump campaign, and Russia. Wyden is particularly interested in whether Russian-backed entities helped the Trump campaign by funneling contributions to the gun rights group that inappropriately and illegally influenced our election, according to a February 2 letter Wyden sent to the NRA. In his letter, Wyden gave the NRA a February 16 deadline to answer a series of questions and produce documents about its potential dealings with any Russian individuals or businesses or their intermediaries, including anything it has turned over to U.S. authorities. I am specifically troubled by the possibility that Russian-backed shell companies or intermediaries may have circumvented laws designed to prohibit foreign meddling in our elections by abusing the rules governing tax-exempt organizations, Wyden wrote. In response to that letter, an attorney for the NRA told the senator's aides that the group was already answering questions about possible Russian donations as part of an FEC inquiry, according to a statement from Wyden's office. Brad Woodhouse, treasurer for the American Democracy Legal Fund, said he received confirmation from the FEC that it had launched a preliminary investigation into the group's complaint. While not confirming the probe, an FEC official said such investigations are launched after FEC lawyers determined that there is at least the potential that campaign finance laws were broken. Woodhouse, a longtime Democratic Party activist, said the FEC inquiry is a significant step in getting to the bottom of a very complicated series of relationships between the NRA, the Trump campaign, and Russian entities. This story sounds more like a Tom Clancy novel than a reality, said Woodhouse. But in the age of Donald Trump and possible collusion with Russia, not only is it possible that it's true, but it's possible enough that it needs to be fully investigated. Woodhouse said the FEC is not empowered to investigate whether Russian entities knowingly attempted to pass campaign donations through the NRA and its lobbying arm, which is not required to disclose details of its political donors. But it can look at whether or not the NRA is taking illegal foreign money to conduct political activity, and whether as money is passed on to support the campaign, Woodhouse said. They would have to investigate all of those linkages to determine whether there was any illegal election activity. White House says Trump's North Korea meeting is still in the works. President Donald Trump still intends to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un before the end of May, the White House said Friday, an assertion that comes amid some confusion as to whether the high-stakes meeting will happen at all. The White House announcement of Trump's intentions came in the form of a readout of the president's Friday call with South Korean President Moon Jae-in, whose office initially relayed Kim's reported interest in meeting with Trump. Both leaders affirmed the importance of learning from the mistakes of the past, and pledged continued, close coordination to maintain maximum pressure on the North Korean regime, the White House said in its readout of the call between Trump and Moon. President Trump reiterated his intention to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un by the end of May. The two leaders expressed cautious optimism over recent developments and emphasized that a brighter future is available for North Korea, if it chooses the correct path. Trump's announcement earlier this month that he would meet with Kim sent shockwaves through the world of foreign policy, upsetting decades of precedent that U.S. presidents do not meet with members of North Korea's ruling Kim family. Vice President Mike Pence had been scheduled to meet secretly with Kim's sister at the opening ceremonies of the Winter Olympics in South Korea, a face-to-face that Pence's office said was scuttled by the North Koreans. While the White House has spoken openly about Trump's plans to meet with Kim, including discussion of preconditions that were not included in the president's initial announcement, North Korea has been uncharacteristically silent on the meeting. The North Korean government has yet to acknowledge offering the meeting, and North Korea's state-run media, typically a mouthpiece for the Kim regime, have made no mention of it, prompting questions as to whether the meeting would happen at all. Trump gives McMaster the arson treatment. President Donald Trump's national security advisor H.R. McMaster isn't getting fired, he's getting arsoned, kept in a state of perpetual limbo about his future in the administration, aware that his unpredictable boss could keep him around indefinitely or terminate him at a moment's notice. Like now former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, whom the president dismissed earlier this week, McMaster has never clicked with the president, who prizes personal chemistry and likes to shoot the breeze. And as with the Secretary of State, the president decided months ago amid disagreements over his Afghanistan strategy that McMaster wouldn't be a permanent fixture in his administration. What's changed in recent days, according to a half-dozen White House aides and outside advisors familiar with the situation, is that White House Chief of Staff John Kelly has put increasing pressure on Trump to get rid of McMaster, and that's made the president, who likes to be contrary and doesn't mind frustrating his advisors, increasingly resistant to making a change. Kelly, a former Marine general, has clashed with McMaster and began pushing in November to oust the National Security Advisor, an active-duty Army officer who came into the West Wing after the ouster of Michael Flynn in February 2017. Kelly has been closely aligned with Tillerson and Defense Secretary James Mattis, who he considered a source of stability in the administration. Kelly was upset, according to two senior administration officials, by Trump's decision to remove Tillerson this week, and has in turn resumed his efforts to sour Trump on McMaster. But McMaster's situation differs from Tillerson's in three crucial ways, according to people familiar with the situation. Though McMaster grinds the president's gears on a personal level, Trump continues to believe the National Security Advisor is working to implement his agenda, a view he did not have of Tillerson, who he often felt was undermining him on the world stage, according to two senior administration officials familiar with his thinking. Time is also on McMaster's side. Trump and Kelly have struggled to figure out how to contend with the bad optics of cycling through two national security advisors in less than 2 years, particularly in the midst of so much staff turnover elsewhere in the administration. The two have also had difficulty agreeing on a replacement. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton remains a Trump favorite, and met with the president in the Oval Office last week. But Bolton confidants say he has grown tired of being asked whether he will replace McMaster and insists privately he has had no formal talks with Trump about the matter. McMaster is not the only Trump advisor whose fate is uncertain, rather, uncertainty is one of the only certainties in the Trump administration, where the boss' views are constantly changing, shaped not only by cable news coverage that streams around the clock from dozens of televisions throughout the West Wing, but also by the opinions of a dozen or so Trump friends and advisors who are regularly paying for advice. Trump's White House has already seen an unprecedented degree of senior-level turnover in the West Wing. He has so far churned through a Chief of Staff, Deputy Chief of Staff, Chief Strategist, Staff Secretary, Press Secretary, and multiple communications directors. Before Tillerson, the president let former White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus hang by a thread for weeks on end, enduring a number of indignities and embarrassments, before he ultimately decided to oust him last July. "There will always be change, and I think you want to see change," Trump said on Thursday when asked about impending shakeups. Others, including senior military officials, aren't so sure whether the constant churn, or even the prospect of it, is a net positive. "I do sometimes wonder if the commander-in-chief doesn't realize that he can't be seen to criticize every single person he has selected for his cabinet, because at a certain point in time, if that's the case, then you have to really seriously question the judgment he's exercised in picking people," said a former senior military commander who remains in frequent contact with administration officials. The president signed off on White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders' tweet Thursday night in the wake of a Washington Post story indicating he had decided to fire McMaster. "Just spoke to @POTUS and General HR McMaster," she said. "Contrary to reports, they have a good working relationship and there are no changes at the NSC." On Friday, she told reporters during her regular briefing that Trump and McMaster had been in meetings together earlier in the day but said she did not know whether they had discussed his job security. "General McMaster is a dedicated public servant and he's here not focused on the news stories that many of you are writing but big issues, things like North Korea, things like Russia, Iran," Sanders said. "That's what he's doing and that's what we are going to continue to be focused on every day as we show up for work." McMaster briefly appeared outside the West Wing on Friday afternoon while escorting guests out, prompting a throng of reporters to gather in hopes he'd make a statement. But the beleaguered National Security Advisor re-entered the building without answering shouted questions. ABC News subsequently reported that he answered one reporter's question about his status by saying, "Everybody has got to leave the White House at some point." White House aides say McMaster is likely to be awarded a fourth star and return to the Army in the coming months, though it's unclear when exactly that will happen. Along with McMaster, reports in recent days have also suggested Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson, Veterans Affairs Secretary David Shulkin, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt and Interior Secretary Ryan Zink are in danger of being ousted. One senior administration official said there is unlikely to be a widespread, simultaneous purge of senior appointees. "I don't think there will be a day you wake up where 3 or 4 people are out at the cabinet level," the official said, predicting a somewhat more orderly process for any impending cabinet shakeup. "There is some acknowledgement within the West Wing that the situation is untenable, with officials unsure on who to turn to for even basic tasks and unsure of their own status on constantly shifting ground. It needs to be resolved," said the senior administration official. "We're in a holding pattern right now that cannot continue." Andrew Ristusa contributed to this report.